don't realize that what they have is not normal. So you just assume it's normal or that everyone else has similar stuff. And a lot of people do. You just learn to survive around it. Oftentimes, you don't realize that the unhealthiness until you grow up and get interacting with healthy people and realize, oh, this is normal. Oh, well, I've never had this before. Oh, you mean, okay, talking crap about each other all the time? That's not normal. People don't do that. No, they don't. Oh, okay.
You said that you were abused by the religion clergy. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yes, part of my story, I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and sex trafficking, and was abused by clergy. Actually, I think assault is the better term.
What does clergy actually mean?
Clergy is a general term for any kind of ordained person in any kind of religion. So in this case, it was a Methodist minister, but that could be pastors, priests, rabbis. They're all classified as clergy. It just means a religious leader or part of the religious leadership with any organized religion would be considered clergy.
What was it like growing up for you? Like, when you remember growing up, how was it?
Oh, well, the abuse and the trafficking I blocked out till I was an adult. So, how repressed memories work, it's like part of my brain seals off those memories in a vault, but it wasn't waterproof. It was kind of leaky. So those leaks of all that stored trauma still informed my decisions, informed how I responded to people. Uh, and I didn't understand why I did the things I did and thought the ways I did. It didn't make any sense until, as an adult, these things started to uncover, and then so many more things made sense. It was like a huge, giant puzzle piece I was able to put in and finish the puzzle, and then I got a clear picture of what was going on. Because of the abuse and the trauma, I was afraid of boys, a hard time making friends, very much a loner. Uh, and I didn't know why. Had a lot of mixed feelings towards my father, a lot of anger, but I looked up to him and I was afraid of him. And I was then raised by a single mom for the rest of my time living with her. And that was difficult. But now I've come to terms with a lot of that, recovered a lot of those memories and dealing with all of that. And now I work with other men who deal with similar traumas in their life and help them find healing as well. But yeah, it was very difficult because you have things like PTSD that you don't even understand that you're doing it, that you even have it. And so responding out of trauma, not even knowing what that was or why I'm responding the way I was, that the hypervigilance is a key symptom for those of us who have PTSD. And that means you're constantly aware, a little part of the back of your brain, it's like it's trying to keep you safe, it's trying to keep you alive. So it's constantly on the alert. So big crowded rooms or classrooms in school, it's like, okay, you either want to be right up front near the door or in the back where you can see everything. And same thing in church. You go to church, it's like, okay, I really want to be in the back near where the exits are, and so I can see everyone, and then it's safe because I'm near the door. And same thing in crowds. Okay, I don't want to be in the middle of the crowd. I want to be in the all these subconscious things going in my mind because that big part of my brain was working so hard to keep me safe, to keep me alive. And those things just keep playing over and over again until you can get healing and get over those things. And it's like, oh, you turn it off because what happens with trauma and what they call CPTSD, which is complex PTSD, it's relatively new diagnosis. It's recognized internationally in the mental health community. It's yet to be recognized officially in the US as a diagnosis, but they know it exists, and a lot of therapists do understand it pretty well. But it means that you had ongoing trauma, so that if you have immediate trauma, you have the fight or flight response There's several other responses as well, freeze and so forth. But what happens is when it's trauma after trauma after trauma, your brain doesn't know how to turn that off. All those brain chemicals that release so that you can make that split second decision. Okay, am I going to run? Am I going to fight? Or all those other responses. What am I going to do to keep myself alive? And then trauma after trauma after trauma. The brain continues to think it is in that fight or flight state even after the trauma stops. And there's no longer a danger. Your brain is still, okay, I'm in danger. I have to keep myself safe. And so it's constantly in that state of mind, even though you don't necessarily realize it. And then it's not until you can find healing from that where it actually will stop. And you can, when I finally got to a point where I found healing for that just in the last 5 years, once it hit, I didn't even understand it at first, just everything felt really calm for the first time in a long time. And then it took meeting with my therapist realizing, oh, I've overcome uh, that hypervigilance. And now I felt calm for the first time. And it was so freeing. So there is healing out there. You can find it. You can overcome all these pains and hurts that were never our fault. The abuse was never our fault. And so many men feel so overwhelmed with feelings of guilt and shame. And that's part of the grooming that they experience from perpetrators. But the grooming is trying to convince you that this is not abuse, but that you want this, that this is a good thing. This is part of a relationship. And it's not only grooming the perpetrators, but they call it grooming the gatekeepers. So the people who are in charge of that person, of that child, which would include the parents, the schools, the churches, the community, that they are groomed as well. So if that child ever comes forward and accuses this guy of doing what he's actually doing, no one will believe him because, oh my gosh, he's so good. He's such a nice person. Something must be wrong with you to even think such a thing.
What were your parents like? You said you were basically terrified of your father.
Terrified is really a strong word. It was a mixture of anger and fear and longing because the time he did spend with us, he pretty much ignored us, me and my sisters. Not a lot of heavy bonding time, though that was part of that generation too. They weren't very involved in child raising. The fathers weren't back then. This was in the mid 60s and early 70s. That just wasn't a thing. And I know there was issues between him and my mom, and so my mom would then do the enmeshment things, where that means if the mom treats their children more like a spouse, so I was more like a surrogate husband. Not that she did anything like physical to me specifically, but a lot of emotional, what they call enmeshment, where she would rely on me too much to meet some of those emotional needs, and that's not healthy either. And so, yeah, things got messy on both sides.
So she would basically treat you as a substitute husband.
Right, right, in that role. So she would confide in me and so forth. And plus, I was the baby and I was the only boy. So, yeah, that would end up causing issues with my sisters because then I got treated differently than them and then they got jealous. And yeah, especially my middle sister, there was a lot of that dysfunction in there for sure. Yeah.
How did you feel during like that during that with your like family and everything?
I mean, kids don't realize that what they have is not normal, so you just assume it's normal or that everyone else has similar stuff, and a lot of people do. You just learn to survive around it. Oftentimes, you don't realize that the unhealthiness until you grow up and get interacting with healthy people and realize, oh, this is normal? Oh, well, I've never had this before. Oh, you mean, okay, talking crap about each other all the time? That's not normal. People don't do that. No, they don't. Oh. Okay. So I had to educate myself as to what healthy family life looked like.
Did you kind of realize this like during like with your friends at school and stuff? Like, really, this is not normal.
Yeah, most of my friends, divorce was very common back then. So a lot of people had divorced parents. And my mom remarried, and he wasn't wonderful either. Didn't do anything abusive, but a lot of kids came from divorce. And that was latchkey generation where, yeah, both parents worked and you had the keys to come in and you'd help yourself
Mhm.
and take care of yourself until one of them got home from work. So, yeah, you were often by yourself for several hours in the afternoon after school, and that was very normal. Um, and all the other kids, same thing. It was very normal. So, yeah, and especially for those that had single moms, then yeah, then it was even more so where we kind of took care of ourselves. And then when you had friends, we kind of took care of each other.
In the text, you mentioned that your dad abused you. Something about that you were abused by your family. Could you talk about that?
There's two parts. He was sexually abusing me from when I was very, very little until I was about 5. And then he trafficked me took sexually to other men, which means he then took me to others to let other people have sex with me. And that's specifically sex trafficking. And because it was a family member who was controlling it, it's called familial sex trafficking or family controlled sex trafficking. And which means as a child, I never got a say, I never got a vote saying, yes, let's go do this. And children can't consent to sex because our brains aren't mature enough to even understand what that means. Plus, in my instance, he gave me things to make me asleep or mostly asleep, so I didn't really know what was going on in theory, though my body did. And then he would take me to these events. And yeah, stuff happened with all the other men who were at these events.
When did you kind of realize this? Because you said you were young.
Um, I didn't. The abuse by my father, I didn't remember until I was 30. And so this was like, 20 plus years after the abuse stopped. And then the trafficking, I didn't remember until after my own kids had left home and gone off to college. And it's what they call empty nester. So, yeah, we had an empty nest. The kids left the nest, and it was just me and my wife. And so I could spend time working on my own stuff because I had more time because I didn't have two children to try to raise. And then I got help. I started to see a therapist and deal with some of these issues. And then we uncovered that, yes, not only had he abused me, but yes, I was also trafficked. And that didn't come out until 2019, which is just a little over 5 years ago, almost 6 years now, that uncovered the fact that, yeah, he had trafficked me.
Do you have any memories from back then?
They're starting to come out. Once that gate was open, then more and more stuff would come out. PTSD flashbacks, where my brain would want to relive some of those events. Keep in mind, I was sedated, but there's books written that your body remembers stuff, remembers what happens. And that's what happened with me. My body remembered all of that trauma. And yeah, starting to bring those things forward to help me to remember the horrible things that happened, which is healthy because then instead of having it shoved down deep inside, I could let it out and process it and get rid of it and heal, which was very difficult. But yeah, but what I do remember and the pieces that we've been able to with therapy put together, so many other things made sense how I responded to things. Same thing that happened when I realized I had been abused. A lot of things were explained, but a lot of things weren't. And those things that weren't explained, once we realized I'd been trafficked, okay, then a lot more things made sense.
You said something about like when you were little that your dad said, "Get your mattress, put it in the truck."
Yes, yes, that's how that happened. That part of the grooming, he groomed my mother and my sisters to believe, oh, we were going camping that weekend. And so, under the guise of camping, pretending that we were going camping, he got me up in the middle of the night and said, yeah, let's get your mattress, put it in the back of the station wagon, which that was the big family car back then. Now it's SUVs and minivans and so forth, but back then it was a station wagon. And we put the uh, my mattress back in there, and I was half asleep. And then we drove off. I remember waking up, and this was during the gas crisis in the 70s, where there was huge long gas lines, and I think he didn't plan for that. When he had to fill up, he was stuck several hours in the gas line, and whatever sedative he gave me wore off. So then I was wide awake when we got to this place, so I knew where we were, who was there. I saw faces and so forth. And we believed that was probably the last event I was ever brought to. And because I was awake, I did not actually get trafficked at that, but it was a trafficking site where all these men, middle class white men, brought their little boys to this thing for one big giant sex party, basically. Me and two other boys had the same thing where we woke up. So they said, okay, you stay in this area of the campground we're at. You don't come to these buildings we're all in. You stay there. Here's your border. You stay on that side. You go play. We'll bring meals out to you. And don't get dirty. Don't get in the water. And that was it. It was supposed to be camping, but that wasn't camping. It was abandoning us for the day to go play. And me and the other younger boy didn't get it. We were like so confused, wondering what's going on. The older boy, something in his eyes he knew, and he just said, you don't want to know. And something in my brain said, remember this. This is very, very important. Looking at him now, he knew what was going on, and he wasn't happy about it. And it made him very angry. But I think he knew, for whatever reason, he had enough knowledge, but he wouldn't tell us. Just looking back, how he responded, there was a lot of anger. And yeah, so looking back now that I know what I know, it's like, oh, yeah, he knew. And looking at the other younger boy, I could tell how he looked was similar to I looked. And yeah, he had been abused as well. Just remembering how he looked, I don't know. It just made a lot of sense. It wasn't until 2019 that I really understood what that memory was. And that was the last time. And then so many other things made sense.
Was he like 12, 13? Like, how old do you think he was?
Maybe a year older. I was probably 8, maybe he was 9 or 10. Still very young, before puberty, so not quite a teenager, just a little bit older, but still a kid.
Did you meet more than once, or did you just like meet that one time?
That particular event that I was awake for, that was the one time that I remember going to one of these weird events. Now, going back through therapy and so forth, it happened multiple times, multiple weekends over several years. So maybe like one or two events a month over several years. Whether that was always the venue or there were several different places that this happened, I don't know. And that was right around the time that my father divorced my mother. That was about probably soon after that.
If you don't mind me asking, what was the reason your father, like, or is that like that could be too personal? Just let me know.
Looking back, I aged out. I was the last child. He was a pedophile. The whole reason he married my mother was to convince her to have children so he could have his own private children to do things with. And he was only interested in a certain age group. And once I was too old and not in that age group, he was no longer interested and he left. That's that's how I understand it.
After your father left and everything, how did your life go from there?
Well, it was hard. My mom was on public assistance for a while, but we did what we could. We lived with our grandma, her mom, for a while until she was able to get a job and support us, and then eventually remarried. And her second husband helped take care of us when we moved to the suburbs. That was different. He didn't like kids either. So that was hard and stressful and a lot of dysfunction with that. And so, yeah, I was glad to move away to college and then move away. I ended up moving to basically the other side of the country. I grew up in Oregon and now I'm in North Carolina. So, and quite happy. I think it helped to get me healthy, to get away from the unhealth of my extended family.
Going back, you were 20 years old when you were molested by the clergy.
When I was 20, though I looked about 16, Methodist minister of the church I was attending took an interest in me, and which I didn't realize at the time, he was a pedophile who liked teenage boys, and I fit the profile. And I was of a legal age, so he took a very much interest in me and agreed to come to my apartment. And then he attempted sex with me, grabbed me in places that he shouldn't have. And once I realized what he was really there for, I got him to leave and he was able to leave. But yes, it would be sexual assault for sure.
How did people react to you when you said something about it?
Well, it took a while. I finally told a good friend, female friend. We were in the same campus ministry group, and she was a good friend. And I finally told her. And then she convinced me, one, I had to leave that church. I was still attending the same church. And then I needed to tell the leader of our campus ministry what had happened. But he didn't know how to confront the situation. And we went and confronted him. He didn't, the minister, he denied everything. He denied every meeting with me. And, and my leader didn't know what to do at that point, didn't have strong guidance. And I think that he checked with his own pastor, and his own pastor didn't give him much guidance either. Fast forward a couple years, I had gone to a new church and eventually told that pastor. I think I overheard that the same minister was doing questionable things with teenage boys. And at the time, I thought, well, I was the only victim. Then I realized, oh, there's other victims. Perpetrators, it's like a lion and a herd of wildebeest will pick out, oh, that's the weak one. Okay, that's the one I can attack. And they'll go after that. And because I had all that trauma built into me, I already was that weak one. That so many survivors, and I work with a lot of survivors. One person put it, it's like a neon sign over my head flashing, victim, victim, victim. And then the
Yeah.
perps just go towards you. And so many of us get abused multiple times by people because that victimhood is this flashing red light, just like that lion picking out the weak one under the herd. They can pick out, oh, yeah, that's the target right there. And I had to tell someone, so I told my pastor at that time. And even though it was a different denomination, he was very strong and adamant about making sure this guy got removed. So he talked to his leadership and we set up meetings and so forth and got him to confess to about 99% of what happened, which, like, the small 80% would have been passable, but that last section that he did admit to just horrified leadership. It's like, so you did all these things. You may not have done that last thing that he says you did, but you did all the other things leading up to it. And they're going, okay, we've heard enough. Yeah. But he got a wrist slap. And that's what happens within church leadership when you go that route. They did not remove him. They said, well, he's near retirement age. We'll just keep him away from children. And after retirement age, I found out they eventually put him back in the service working with other groups. And did they know they needed to keep away from children? I don't know. But and he had been moved from church to church, state to state across the country. And I found out later that after I made my complaint, other people from other decades had come forward that said he had done similar things to them. So he had several victims, and we were the ones who came forward. Usually, in most cases of sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, the perpetrators, it's not a one-off thing where they do it once and that's it. It's usually again and again and again and again and again.
Did he get counseling or any they put
They
him in
did, though I don't know how effective it was, and they still brought him back into the fold, into working part-time, and yeah, it's sad how they did that, and yeah, um, but yeah, they gave him counseling apparently, but yeah, I don't know how much good it did. I don't know if he ever re-perpetrated. No idea. By
did,
that time I had moved to the other side of the country, so I yeah did not know.
well, other than that, unless there's anything else, it was great having you. Thank you for telling me about your story, and you have 15 seconds to share a company, a website, anything your heart desires. Go now.
Polarlifeconsulting.com, and you can find more about my podcast and about my life coaching, including brain spotting.